Moved to American-made harmonicas. There weren't very many of these, and most of them were made toward the end of either World War I or World War II. The exception is called the Bell brand harmonica, and all of these are pretty ordinary looking little harmonicas, by the way. This is made by the National Musical String Company in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Has a pretty good sound. It was made back around 1911 to 1915, I believe, from the literature I can find. Then, toward the end of World War I, a company started up in California called the Reagan, G.R. Reagan Company, and they made a 10-hole diatonic harmonica. That one sounds pretty good, but it's early. It has double tabs on each end, which is what makes me believe this was the end of World War I. It's called the Triumph. The Reagan Company also made one called the Triumph near the end of World War II. If I can get it out of the box. That's in pretty good shape. Some of the Reagan harmonicas were not really playable. Then there was a group in New Jersey that made harmonicas. One was the Pratt Company, and I have those examples in other locations. One was called the U.S. Navy Band, made by the American Harmonica Company, which I believe was associated with Pratt. And there's one that we found that is really puzzling because it was made in Meriden, Connecticut, called the Peerless, over the top. And we're doing some research to try to find out about that one. The reason these were made at the end of the two world wars is that when those times were with us, harmonicas were not coming in from Germany because Germany was the enemy in those wars. And certain individuals saw an opportunity to start in the manufacture of harmonicas, and they got the technology from various sources, immigrant workers from the Hohner Company in some cases. But as soon as the war was over and Germany got back on its feet, the harmonicas began to flood back into the United States, and these U.S. manufacturers could not compete, and they went out of business. The Reagan Company put their plant in mothballs in 1919 or thereabouts, and it was resurrected in 1943, stayed in operation 2 or 3 years only while they made a few models of harmonicas, and then had to go out of business when the German, especially Hohner models, came back in. A very interesting style of harmonica is what I call the sliding cover type. These were only made for perhaps 15 years, at least the style with the celluloid covers. This one is called the Dorfel, and I'll demonstrate. Push the harmonica at one end, and it slides out the other, exposing the reeds, which could then be tuned or repaired, replaced, worked on, whatever, without having to take the metal cover plates off and taking more time and making it difficult to put them back on again. They came in various styles. This one, the Dorfel, has a cover that wraps all the way around. This one has two covers, one on each side. It's called the Kentucky Home, and the covers slide off. Thusly exposing the reeds. I have a number of others. They're all fairly ordinary looking, but based on the styles and advertisements that we find for this type of harmonica, most of them were made right around the turn of the last century. A very interesting harmonica in the collection, which seems to be unique, at least no one else has reported one, is a chromatic. Chromatics are not so uncommon, but this one certainly is. Comes in a box, and it's double-sided. Give you a closer look. There's a chromatic button there, and another one there, in the keys of G and E. And of course, like chromatics, when you press the button, it changes the whole range of notes by a half a tone. Excuse me, G and C. It's not evident which is which, so that's one side. I think there may be a little leakage on that side because you get both. This is the G side. Apparently they weren't very popular because there are so few of them around. It was made by the Gretsch company, who also made guitars, in this great box, and there's the Gretsch label. Another thing of interest, which I won't play for you, is this little set. It has a card at the top with two fingerprints or thumbprints, and the card reads, "I have played this harmonica and I am pleased to donate it to Canyon School." Then the prints, and then typed in Stevie Wonder. It's an ordinary harmonica. It's a blues harp by Hohner, but we have to take it as authentic. I suppose we could check the fingerprints with some source. We thought we'd jump back in time to my very earliest harmonicas, and one of the earliest that you can identify as a harmonica made anywhere, be it Germany or in this country, and this one happens to have been made in New York. I got it through a contact which sent me an email, told me about it, put me in touch with the owner. I made a special trip to New York City to see it, and once I saw it, I obviously had to have it. The outer case was not the original. That's just for protection. There is an original case with it, which says, a little label, "Sold at the Depository of Arts, Bourne's 359 Broadway, New York." It doesn't look like much, but it has the name of the maker on it, and through research they've identified him as a musical instrument maker in New York around 1828, 29, and 30. So this is from that era. The earliest harmonica to be made, they think, was around 1824 in Germany, and even that is in dispute. But this is a fantastic instrument. It was not really called a harmonica then, it was called an aeolian. I don't know if you can pick it up on this, but this is a copy of instructions for the aeolian. And these strange-looking people from the 1830s are playing little bitty tiny versions of the aeolian, which probably had 3 or 4 notes on them. This is a big version of it, and it's a chord harmonica. It plays only on blow, and it plays in 3 different chords. As I recall, it's D, G, and A. But every one of those little reeds still plays. This is the tonic chord. I forget if this is the dominant or subdominant. That's the dominant. That's the subdominant. There are 16 reeds mounted on a nickel, piece of solid nickel as the reed plate, with the little slots cut out, and brass reeds. And what looks like American walnut to me as the wood on the other side. So this is my, well, this and the Pipolian, I guess I have to say this is my, my ultimate prize, because it's, I guess, a good 50 years older than my next oldest known harmonica. So I thought you'd be interested to see that, that treasure.
Absolutely.
The next oldest artifacts I have were dug up at Civil War battle sites. And these are reed plates that were found at Civil War battle sites. And some of them I can say fairly certainly came from that period, which would be the first part of the 1860s, 61 to 65, let's say. But there are 1 or 2 that have other characteristics of later harmonicas, so they just happened to show up at the battle site, or maybe they were misrepresented. But 4 of these were reed plates from harmonicas, and this one is sort of angled out, and that was from a concertina, which was also a popular instrument of the time. So from there we jump to my next oldest, which would be in the 1880s, I would say. And they were some of the harmonicas that we saw in the dental cabinet. Here we have 2 old glass cases put out by the Hohner Company, and they're nice in themselves, and they lend themselves perfectly for keeping my miniature harmonica collection. This has been fun to build up over the years because most of these are playable harmonicas. They have usually 4 or 5 holes. On a 4-hole you can play an 8-note diatonic scale. And there's a lot of ordinary looking ones. The Hohner Little Lady is the most popular one, and there's several of those in this case in their boxes. But the ones that are my favorites are again, things that don't look exactly like a harmonica. Here we have a little baseball bat called Babe's Musical Bat. That's a 5-hole, 10-note harmonica, and everything plays. Same person that made that made this look like a bowling pin called the Kingpin. The biggest of my miniatures, I guess, is this one. It's called the Radio Trumpet. It has a 5-hole harmonica in the side and a horn in the end, like a party horn. What else? Oh, Here's a neat one. It's a cigar. You see the ash on the end of it. It's got a 5-hole harmonica, and the cigar band on it with the maker's name, Mr. Bohm, who made the musical bat and the bowling pin. It's made out of wood, but it's colored to look like a cigar wrapper. These are basically endless. There's one that looks like a hot air balloon. There's one that looks like an airship with the gondolas hanging down below, and it's called the Shenandoah, which was another of the famous airships of the 1920s, I think. One of my favorites is this one I bought in England at a flea market at Portobello Road. It's 9-carat gold. Doesn't get much lower than that, I think. But it plays. And it's got a little 4-hole miniature harmonica sort of buried inside this gold casing. There are toys. Here's a couple that look like little pistols, but they only have a couple of reeds in each one. They're just toy harmonicas. Look like pistols. One of my smallest items looks like binoculars, but it's a pitch pipe, and it plays 2 notes. And I have a collection of pitch pipes, but it seemed to belong best over here. I have a number of rather special harmonicas. Not exactly a harmonica, but on the top here I have a bronze medal with a bust of Matthias Hohner, the founder of the Hohner Company, who started in business in 1857 and is still going strong. Of course, his sons took over when he died in 1902, and its grandsons and great-grandsons at this point, and I think it's actually been bought out by a Taiwanese company, I heard. But this was the 100th year commemorative medal, 1857 to 1957. So they're not too easy to come by. Now this rotating case makes it a good place to exhibit some of these models. There's one here that's kind of a favorite of mine. It looks like a harp. And you can very faintly see strings lined up there, but it has a harmonica in the side of it. It's a wooden exterior, and it plays. It's got ornate flower decorations on the outside there. Here's a zany one. The only one I have with cymbals on it. Play the harmonica and play the cymbals at the same time. Isn't that neat? And it actually has a wooden block here, so these hit the block, so you're sort of playing drum and cymbals at the same time. There are some children's blow accordions down here with nice decorations on the side of them. Here we have some pretty early models. This is a very early double-sided echo by Hohner with his earliest trademark. I would guess that would date from about 1895. And Hohner named a lot of different harmonicas the Marine Band, but this is one that very few people have ever seen. It's not in any of the catalogs that I have, and I've looked through them extensively. It's just a 10-hole. They're double holes, but there are 2 reeds in each hole. I guess it's octave tuned. And it has a nice little shaped box. All I can say is it's different, and they must not have made very many of them, because it's the only one I know of. Here we have some other novelties. This one has jewels in it. Must be a very valuable item, don't you think? Real jewels. Well, they're paste. And it's called the Koh-i-Noor, which was a famous diamond made in, or discovered in India, I believe. I've got several here that are called crackerjack, and those are interesting because people collect crackerjack items, and so they just drive the prices up. This one is somewhat historical. It's called the Coronation Harp, and it has a picture of, I believe that's Edward VII, I'm going by memory here, and his queen on the inside, the English king and queen of that time. I believe it's around 1908 or that time frame. But it's made by Hohner. It's a nice quality harmonica commemorating the coronation of the king. And that brings us back to where we started. I've got a number of other interesting different ones on the top of this cabinet. This cabinet, by the way, is one I made, you might say, purpose-built to store harmonicas in. It's got vertical drawers down below with the harmonicas lined up on shelves, but maybe we can look at that later. We'll start with this interesting chromatic harmonica. You see the button on the side and the holes along here. Fools everybody. It's a rather well-made music box. Made in Japan, by the way. Now here's a four-sided model that most people have never seen, unless they've been here. It's 4 marine bands with the handles on the end, like a regular four-sided harmonica. What makes this unique is that it was made in this house. I had 4 matched marine bands, and I happened to have the ends to go with them, and so why not? Harmonicas back in the 1880s and 90s often came in sets. To find them in sets is like finding hen's teeth in a haystack. This is a set that I found in one of my early catalogs called the Monte Cristo. And each one of these has a different metal on the cover plate. It calls one silver, but I think the silver is mostly worn off. This one is gilt, which would be gold-plated, or a wash of gold, and the other I think is copper. And a nice little presentation box for it. As the label on this says, it's the one and only batonica, because it's in the same category as this. I got a souvenir bat and an old marine band and put it inside. back in the early 40s, an inventor came up with a patent of something ultimately he called the harmonicord. These are the original patent models for that patent. And I know I got them from the nephew of the inventor, and they don't play at all. They're clearly one-of-a-kind patent models for the instrument. And when it was finally produced, it was made in plastic, and it looked like this. And to play this one, you cover up 4 holes with the fingers of each hand, and you blow, and to get the notes, you raise the finger. Be hard to get used to, I think. And you could play chords and notes just like you can on any harmonica, but I don't know how to categorize it. It's not really a blow accordion. It's just a harmonica novelty. Somebody handmade this weird looking thing. It came from Canada, and it's got great big reeds mounted in it. And I guess it's a bass harmonica that somebody constructed. I never really have been able to figure out how one plays it, but it's different. And it's one of a kind, I can assure you of that. These other models along here are just relatively ordinary double-sided models, but to a collector that knows something about different harmonicas, they'll mean something, but there's not too much to be said about them except to other collectors. This folding box here is one of several display boxes, but I have it here because it holds a particular collection of harmonicas that were made by a performer named Minovich. He didn't actually make them, he had them made, most of them. Minovich had a group called the Harmonica Rascals, and they performed on stage and screen and radio in the 1930s up into the 40s pretty well. And as a sideline, he advertised this group of different harmonicas. And the group his stage group was called the Rascals, so one of the harmonicas is called the Rascal. And there's one called the Junior Rascal. And so on. He had some chromatic models. This is his chromatic. And the thing that was different about the Minovich chromatics is that they had the outside spring, even being made into the 30s and 40s, because by then the Hohner company had moved their spring inside. But the Minovich chromatic still had the outside spring. And I've got 3 different types of those. He had a miniature model called the Baguette, and then Hohner put out a little ladies type with Minovich's name on it. He even popularized some of the fiction of the period, or earlier period. He made a harmonica called the Tom Sawyer, and another one called the Huckleberry Finn. And that's about it for Mr. Minovich. Now in this case, I have quite a few different types of harmonicas. In this drawer, there are some Hohner models. Unusual. This one is called the Chromatica, and it plays, each hole is chromatic.